Welcome to my tier list of all the romance and fantasy novels that I've read this year. I'm going to give a brief summary of the book and then ranking it on my tier list. The best tier is I would sell my soul to read this book again. Second tier is thoroughly enjoyed it. Third tier is good enough to recommend to a friend. Fourth tier is forgettable. And the last tier is I don't recommend reading it. I'm going to try and make this video as spoiler free as possible, and if there is a spoiler, I'm going to include a big red X on the side of the screen so that you know to skip those minutes. Without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I'm going to rank is my favorite book so far this year, and it's Powerless. Powerless is a book where we're introduced into a world where there are elites, mundanes, and ordinaries. Elites possess special powers that are really powerful, like being able to wield fire or water. Mundanes have powers too, but they're not as powerful as elites. And then ordinaries don't possess any power. The protagonist of the story, Payton, she is a ordinary, but she disguises herself as being a mundane. The king believes that the existence of ordinaries within close proximity to elites drain and weaken their power. So the king wants to try and kill all the ordinaries. The king has two sons. One is called Kai, who's the future enforcer. And what that means is that he will be responsible to kill all the ordinaries or kill whoever the king wants to be killed when his brother becomes king. The king sends Kai off to a village to kill a ordinary, and in the village, that's where he meets Payton. Payton is the 18-year-old girl who is our protagonist and is very poor and steals for a living. She's chosen to compete in the purging trials alongside Kai and some other elites. When I first read this book, I thought it was a knockoff to The Hunger Games because there were so many similarities. However, I did thoroughly enjoy reading this book and being introduced to the whole world that Lauren Roberts creates. The second book, Reckless, out of the series is more unique and more original than Powerless. The second book doesn't have as many good reviews as Powerless. In my opinion, I like the second book just as much as the first book because I felt like it was more unique. The characters' personalities were more fleshed out and I didn't feel like I was rereading The Hunger Games. So Powerless, I'm going to put it up high. I would sell my soul to read this book again. And Reckless, I'm going to put it right next to it. I really enjoyed these two books. The next book that we're going to talk about is Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing is about a girl called Violet who's forced to become a dragon rider. Now, to become a dragon rider, you have to go through a series of tests that are really brutal and they are also deadly. While she enters the dragon training school, she gets told by her sister not to become close and to avoid Xaden Ryerson. This is because Xaden Ryerson's dad was a traitor and also killed Violet's brother, Brennan. There's a very strong enemies to lovers trope in this book. I really liked the world that Rebecca Yarros paints for us, especially with the dragons. There's some really nice dialogue between the dragons and their riders that I really enjoyed. Fourth Wing, I'm going to place up the top. I would sell my soul to read this again. Now let's talk about Iron Flame. Iron Flame I did not enjoy as much as Fourth Wing. I felt like the plot line was very slow, and despite it being very slow, we still didn't get to know much more about the characters. They weren't as fleshed out as I would like it to be. I would have liked to learn more about Brennan's backstory. Violet became really hard to like in the second book because she was constantly going through these trust issues and communication problems. I enjoyed the last third of this book, and I can see why this book was important to set up for Rebecca Yarros's third book that's coming out in January. I'm going to put it here, good enough to recommend to a friend. I think I would need to recommend this book so that my friend can read the third one. Let's talk about the first Ali Hazelwood book that I read, and that was Love Hypothesis. Love Hypothesis is about Olive Smith, who is a PhD candidate and ends up fake dating a young and smart professor. She does this so that she can convince her friend that she is well and truly over her ex and that her friend can start dating her ex. Some scenes were a little bit cringe, especially the lecture theatre scene. Those who have read it will know what I'm talking about. I like how it's got two spicy chapters that are combined together so that if you aren't into spice, you can just skip those two chapters. Love Hypothesis, I'm putting Love Hypothesis as forgettable just because I feel like I enjoyed some other Ali Hazelwood books better than that. Okay, let's talk about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. So this book is about a boy called Sam who ends up in a car crash and befriends a girl called Sadie at the hospital. Sadie and Sam develop a friendship because they both love video games. And this book follows their friendship over a few decades. They end up developing a video game together, and the book goes through their journey of their struggles, their successes, and even deaths. The book isn't purely romance, but it is about love and it is about friendship. So I've included it in this tier list. I really enjoyed this book. I finished it within 2 days. I partially listened to it and partially read it. I'm going to include it as I would sell my soul to read this book again. I really liked it. Okay, now let's talk about Normal People by Sally Rooney. Normal People is about a girl called Marianne, and she is a shy and awkward teenager, and she develops a secret relationship with a boy called Connell, and we follow their lives from as high school students to university students. So in high school, Marianne is awkward and shy, and Connell is well liked and popular. When they are at university, their roles are flipped, and Marianne becomes super popular and Connell finds it hard to make friends. The book follows the two main characters as they weave in and out of each other's lives, and it exposes their struggles and insecurities. This book was good, and I'm going to place it in thoroughly enjoyed it. I like how this book really fleshes out the characters. It shows and not tells, if you know what I mean. You really understand where Marianne comes from and that she's not a flawless character. Let's talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I'm really late into this saga of A Court of Thorns and Roses. I didn't read it when it came out in 2015, and I think I didn't miss out on much. Don't hate me for saying that. A Court of Thorns and Roses is about a girl named Farah, and she's an impoverished girl who accidentally kills a fairy that was disguised as a wolf. She later gets taken to the fairy court against her own will by someone called Tamlin. Tamlin is the High Lord of the Spring Court. At the Spring Court, she learns about all the complex politics and the curse that's been placed along the land, and she also warms up to Tamlin. It's got a lot of elements of Beauty and the Beast in this book. I finished this book because I wanted to read the sequel, and the sequel has better reviews than the first book. I'm reading the sequel right now, and I have really high hopes because it's got such good reviews, and there's a TV series that's coming out based on the books. I'm going to place it in forgettable. I'm so sorry. So sorry to all the fans. The reason why I'm placing it as forgettable is because I just feel like the main characters could have been fleshed out a lot more. Their love story just didn't grab me. I didn't feel like there was high stakes to their love story. I felt like she didn't get to know him before really warming up to him. And that's why I've placed it as forgettable. Their chemistry and romance just didn't do it for me. Let's move on to Twisted Love. Twisted Love is a love story between Ava and Alex. Alex is Ava's brother's best friend who moves next door to Ava. Alex is house sitting Ava's brother's house while he's away working. Alex in the book is described as really cold and emotionless, so Ava and her friends design a game where Ava tries to bring out some emotion into Alex. The book is very bingeable. It was really quick for me to read, and the spicy scenes were pretty good too. I enjoyed reading both Alex and Ava's point of view in this book. I'm going to include it in good enough to recommend to a friend. There were parts in the book that was really cringe and a little bit unbelievable. I didn't like the whole idea of Ava and her friends coming up with schemes to get emotions out of Alex. I feel like there could have been a better story arc or a better way of introducing their love story. I also didn't like the ending where Alex sings for Ava. I thought that was so cringe. Let's move on from Twisted Love to Twisted Games. Twisted Games is written in one of Ava's friends' point of view. She's a princess and she falls in love with her bodyguard. The book is about how she keeps her relationship a secret as she meets suitors that her family have chosen for her to meet and for her to get to know. I didn't mind this book and it was really easy to read and I read it really quickly. I'm going to place it next to Twisted Love. Good enough to recommend to a friend. Alrighty. Next, let's talk about Happy Place. Happy Place is about a couple who have recently broken up their engagement and find themselves both invited to a summer beach house where they pretend to get along for 1 week. The story retraces some of their old romantic history and there's this underlying ache that you feel when you read these past stories because you know the outcome. I really enjoyed this book and I'm actually going to put it in Thoroughly Enjoyed It next to Normal People by Sally Rooney. Let's get all of Anna Huang's books out of the way. Let's talk about King of Wrath. So King of Wrath reminds me a lot of Twisted Love. If you like Twisted Love, you're going to like King of Wrath. King of Wrath is about a girl called Vivian and she's forced into an arranged marriage by her parents to someone called Dante. Dante is a super successful businessman and is super wealthy. Vivian moves into Dante's apartment to keep up with the appearances of actually being together and he slowly warms up to her. The book has a very big enemies to lovers trope. I'm going to put it next to Twisted Love just because I think they're all roughly around the same tier. Let's go into all of Ali Hazelwood's books. Love Theoretically is possibly my most favorite Ali Hazelwood book. It's about a physicist who by day works as a physicist and by night ends up offering fake girlfriend services. When she becomes a fake girlfriend, she has a new name and a new job. One of her clients hires her to go to a family event and at that family event she meets Jack Smith. She finds out that Jack Smith is a physicist when she meets him at the hiring committee for the job that she wants. I read this book really quickly because I liked the plot and the banter and the romance. Okay, so I'm tossing up between placing it in Thoroughly Enjoyed It and I Would Sell My Soul to read this book again. Oh, I really liked it. I'm going to put it up to I Would Sell My Soul to read this again. It was really good. Let's talk about Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. It's about Bree who is forced to work with her arch nemesis Levi. There is a enemies to lovers trope in this book, but I wouldn't say they were true enemies. The book would have been a lot shorter if they had hashed out their miscommunications a lot earlier in this book. I didn't enjoy this book as much because I found some portions of the book really frustrating. So let's put it in good enough to recommend to a friend. The last Ali Hazelwood book that I want to talk about is called Not in Love. It follows Rue, who is a biotech engineer. She works at a company that's going to get taken over by a group of people and one of them is Eli. When she finds out that Eli and his business partners are going to take over the company, it's not the first time that Rue has met Eli. Rue had met Eli previously on a dating app and they had met in person at a hotel. I didn't enjoy the book as much because I felt like their relationship wasn't really fleshed out. There was definitely a lot of spicy scenes, but the romance and the connection on a deeper level just wasn't there. Which means I'm going to place it in Don't Recommend Reading. I know that's a bit harsh. Actually, okay, I feel like that was too harsh. Let's put it in Forgettable. I would still recommend reading it because I love all Ali Hazelwood books. Let's talk about the Colleen Hoover books on my tier list. So It Ends With Us is a story about Lily Bloom and she tries to reinvent herself after the death of her father. While Lily is in Boston, she meets Ryle and Lily and Ryle fall in love pretty much immediately, but Ryle isn't all what he seems to be. Simultaneously, Lily reconnects with one of her childhood friends called Atlas, who played a really pivotal part in her childhood. I enjoyed this book. I read it also pretty quickly. It made me understand the feelings of why women stay in these relationships. I would put it up in good enough to recommend to a friend. It Starts With Us. Now that's a different story. I actually don't recommend reading this book. It follows Lily's life after she's given birth and how she reconnects with Atlas. The book also introduces more about Atlas's family and Atlas's brother. I felt like this book was a really long prologue. There were parts in the book that were repeats of the parts from It Ends With Us. I felt like reading it was completely unnecessary for the enjoyment of It Ends With Us. So I'm going to place it in don't recommend reading. Let's talk about the lucky last book in the tier list, Better Than the Movies. Better Than the Movies is about a girl called Liz who is a senior in high school, and her childhood crush called Michael has just returned back into town. With the help of Wes, a boy who lives next door to her and also a friend of Michael's, she tries to gain Michael's attention and try and get a date with him. The book navigates her feelings towards Wes and Michael, and it also feels like a coming of age story. It's a cute love story, and I really enjoyed Liz's internal dialogue as she navigates through these feelings. So I'm going to include it in thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it was really sweet. Now that's the end of my tier list. I hope I didn't disappoint you too much or make you too mad. Thank you so much for watching, and follow for more.